Hi, welcome. Settle in, because what you're about to witness isn't just a story. It's a collision of trust, betrayal, and the quiet power of revelation. Jack got home just before 1 o'clock in the morning, carrying the weariness of a last-minute flight delayed beyond reason, compounded by a long, exhausting layover in Denver. No one knew he was coming back early, 2 days ahead of schedule. The element of surprise was his secret, and deep down he hoped it might bridge the distance he'd been feeling with Claire. He had imagined the moment he would slip in, quietly, the faint smile already playing on his lips as he pictured her startled, happy expression when the door opened. Yet the first thing that struck him as he pulled up wasn't the joy of the reunion he envisioned. It was a silence so profound it pressed against the car windows and wrapped around the house like a shadow. Everything was dark, unnervingly still. At first, he tried to convince himself she might be out for a late errand, a pharmacy run, maybe visiting a friend, but the garage was open. Claire's car, usually a comforting anchor in its familiar spot, was gone. His chest tightened, a slow, insistent knot of unease coiling within him. Jack tried to shake it off, telling himself he might just be overreacting, but something primal whispered that this wasn't right. He went inside without turning on the lights, stepping into the hallway with careful, measured movements. Each footfall echoed unnaturally, exaggerating the eerie quiet that pressed against him. In a moment of instinct, he pulled his phone from his pocket and dialed. The line rang twice before Claire answered, her voice dragging, stretched out as if she had just woken from a deep sleep. "Hello," she murmured. "Hi, love," he said, keeping his voice low, calm, but inside, every nerve hummed with tension. "Did I wake you?" she asked. Her tone was smooth, casual, a practiced ease that barely concealed the pause before she answered. "I was sleeping." "Yes. I'm already closing my eyes here." Jack held for 2 seconds, controlling the sudden surge of panic and disbelief, before asking quietly, "Are you at home?" Claire responded without hesitation, her voice confident, perhaps too confident. "Of course I am, Jack. Where else would I be at this hour?" He walked toward their bedroom without giving her an immediate response. He observed the shadows, the familiar outlines of furniture, knowing she was lying. Every word she had just spoken rang in his ears like a cold, sharp bell. It wasn't instinct anymore. It was certainty. He replied calmly, "All right. I just called to hear your voice. I'm going to sleep. I'll be back on Sunday." Her response was mechanical, a polite cadence devoid of real feeling. "Oh, okay then. I love you. Sleep well. Good night." Claire Jack hung up before she could repeat her words, and for a moment he stood motionless, phone still in hand, absorbing the truth. Every carefully measured phrase, every casual tone she used was a lie. She wasn't in bed. She wasn't sleeping. She had been dishonest, effortlessly, as if she had rehearsed it for weeks. The recognition hit him with a force that stole his breath, leaving him suspended in disbelief and rage, though outwardly calm. This wasn't doubt. This wasn't intuition. This was pure, unadulterated betrayal. Jack sank onto the edge of the stairs, running a hand over his face, tracing the contours of shock, anger, and hurt that coursed through him. Memories came unbidden. The growing distance, unexplained work dinners, sudden mood swings, strange laughs that cut off abruptly whenever he was around. Every nuance, every oddity, every slight had been a piece of a puzzle he was now holding complete in his hands. The house felt alien, a stage set for a performance that had nothing to do with him. As he moved through the dimly lit living room, each step seemed to carry the weight of a life that had been meticulously constructed, now transformed into a theater of deceit. Then he saw it. The wristwatch on the coffee table, large gold with a blue dial and a black leather strap, its extravagance impossible to ignore. He picked it up slowly, almost reverently, as if afraid that touching it might shatter the fragile illusions he'd been clinging to. He knew immediately whose it was. Derek Coleman, Claire's boss. The man he had seen flaunting the watch at a company dinner a year ago. Everything crystallized in that instant. Derek had been in his house. For reasons that didn't require explanation yet, he had left behind the very object that screamed the truth. No speculation, no doubt, no half-truths. Proof lay in his hands. Jack sank back onto the stairs, staring at the ceiling. His heart, which had been thundering with anticipation and fear, now felt impossibly heavy. Pain hadn't arrived yet, but something inside him had begun to harden. He'd always been a man of dialogue, of measured conversation, of patience, but this wasn't a moment for words. If Claire could lie so effortlessly, Jack would let the truth speak louder than anything he could say. He stayed there for a long moment, absorbing the magnitude of what he now knew. Then, just as silently, he began to plan. By morning, his mind had already mapped the contours of a precise surgical response. The watch, left carelessly on the table, became the silent witness he would use to orchestrate a revelation no one could ignore. Every step, every call, every detail would be executed with the same calm certainty he had mustered that night. It wasn't vengeance for its own sake. It was justice, absolute and inescapable, delivered with surgical precision. Early Saturday, Jack woke with the plan already clear. The gold watch lay in its solemn place on the table, still waiting, still silent. He moved with quiet deliberation, placing it into a small box and tucking it into the bottom drawer of the desk. It was a relic of betrayal, now under his control, needing no words. Then he began his calls. Claire would remain unaware, believing he was still out of town, oblivious to the trap slowly closing around her. Each call, each carefully crafted lie about an online delivery was designed to ensure she would be away at exactly the right moment. Her response was casual, effortless, unaware. Claire planned a day out with her sisters, shopping and lunch, leaving the house empty during the exact hours Jack needed. He feigned hesitation, asked for a specific return time, 8 p.m., just enough to anchor her absence. She agreed without question, never suspecting the reality behind his soft-spoken voice. Jack hung up, a faint smile brushing his lips. Everything aligned. The stage was set. The players had unknowingly fallen into place. From there, he expanded the web. He called her parents first, weaving a story about a tribute, a small, intimate celebration for Claire's dedication to volunteering years ago, a noble and plausible reason that would spark their eager participation. Her mother was touched, her father polite but approving. Then her sisters, Sarah and Michelle, followed, delighting in the notion of helping select gifts for the imagined event. Each acceptance reinforced the architecture of his plan, fortifying the calm that masked the storm he was preparing. The circle widened, bringing in friends Amanda, Lisa, and Rachel. Jack knew precisely who to include. Those who cherished Claire, who had once been part of her world of trust and affection, were now unknowing witnesses. The main target wasn't just Claire, it was Derek, too. He needed the perfect conditions to guarantee Derek's presence, and with Derek came Julie, whose reaction would serve as the emotional apex of Jack's revelation. Julie's role, unsuspected and essential, would amplify the consequences of truth in its rawest, most unforgettable form. With calls made and confirmations received, Jack orchestrated every nuance. He arranged snacks, drinks, desserts, seating in the backyard, hanging soft lights to create a deceptive atmosphere of casual celebration. He instructed guests to enter silently, remove shoes, park away from the house. Every detail mattered. Absolute discretion, absolute calm. The illusion had to hold until the climax he had envisioned. Claire must believe the house was empty. She must step into the trap without awareness, unguarded, exposed. Each hour of that day passed with the meticulous rhythm of someone setting the stage for a theatrical performance, but the performance was life itself. Jack adjusted placement of chairs, measured the lighting, rehearsed mental cues for every eventuality. Guests arrived precisely at 6 p.m., moving with quiet reverence, suspending disbelief for a cause they thought noble. Jack guided them with gestures and soft directions, the calm conductor of a symphony that would soon reveal a truth no one could ignore. By evening, everything was aligned. The backyard was ready, the players unwittingly in place, the timing perfect. Claire believed in her safety, in her secrecy. Derek thought he could act with impunity. Jack, calm and deliberate, was the silent architect, the keeper of evidence, and the orchestrator of revelation. The night would soon transform from a simple gathering into an unforgettable exposure, a collision of lies and truth, orchestrated by someone who had waited patiently for the precise moment to let reality speak. The calm that Jack had cultivated all day was not fragile. It was deliberate, cold, and precise. Every movement he made, every adjustment of the backyard table, every sip of water was part of a choreography meant to ensure that the truth would arrive not as a whispered accusation, but as an undeniable revelation. The lights were soft, strategically hung to cast gentle shadows, creating an illusion of warmth and normalcy, while the stage beneath it all simmered with tension. Each snack, each drink, each dessert had been arranged in meticulous order, almost ceremoniously, as though the banquet itself were a witness to the secret about to unfold. He checked the phones of his guests, confirmed their understanding of the instructions once more, and reinforced the importance of silence, of absolute discretion. The precision of the plan mirrored the precision he had demanded in every aspect of his life. The same meticulousness he had applied to work, to relationships, and now to the unmasking of betrayal. Every detail mattered because the stakes were monumental, not just for Claire, but for everyone about to see the hidden, unvarnished truth. Jack's mind wandered briefly to Claire as he walked through the rooms of the house, pausing only to touch familiar surfaces, the kitchen counter, the edges of the sofa, as if reconciling the past with what he now knew. He thought of the years they had spent together, the small moments that had once felt sacred, and the growing suspicion he had felt in the months leading up to this night. Every lie, every half-truth, every sudden absence now bore a weight he could no longer ignore. The person he loved, trusted, and built a life with had orchestrated deceit with a calmness that was almost frightening. Yet in that moment Jack felt no rage, no wild, uncontrolled emotion. He felt the steady, immovable certainty of a man who had witnessed the fracture of trust and now intended to make it visible, undeniable, and irreversible. The backyard, set for celebration, became an arena for truth, a quiet stage on which the masquerade would end. He placed the final drinks on the table, adjusted the soft lights to eliminate any glaring shadows that could betray movement, and then retreated inside to check the position of the back door. Everything had to be perfect. A single misstep could give Claire the slightest hint that the house was no longer empty. Guests were now arriving, slipping silently through the back gate, shoes removed as instructed, their curiosity hidden beneath polite smiles and quiet whispers. Jack greeted each one with a nod or a brief, controlled gesture, guiding them toward their positions like a conductor leading an orchestra. The energy was almost imperceptible, attention coiling silently beneath the surface, waiting for the precise instant when the illusion of normalcy would shatter. He observed their faces, noting their anticipation, their unknowing excitement for what they believed was a tribute of love and recognition, while in reality, every heartbeat in that yard was synchronized with the rhythm of the truth about to be unveiled. Hours passed with deliberate slowness. Each second stretched into eternity as Jack moved quietly through the house, checking cameras, ensuring the glass door offered a clear line of sight, and revisiting the timeline in his mind. The plan relied entirely on precision, and he would not allow improvisation or error to compromise the moment. Claire had to arrive unaware. Derek had to be present, and Julie had to witness the reality she had been spared from seeing until now. Every element was a variable that Jack had calculated meticulously, anticipating the reactions of each participant, understanding that the power of truth did not lie in accusation but in exposure. This wasn't revenge, it was a revelation, a demonstration so undeniable that the masks of deceit would fall naturally, without a single word spoken to provoke panic or confession. As the clock inched toward 7:30 p.m., Jack assumed his position in the hallway, blending into the shadows, his phone ready, camera activated, every angle rehearsed in his mind 1,000 times over. From that vantage point, he could see the living room partially, the rest of the scene visible through the crack of the glass door leading to the backyard. His breathing was steady, controlled, the calm exterior belying the torrent of clarity and anticipation raging within. The lock turned with the familiar click that signaled the beginning, and the door opened slowly. Claire entered with Derek, laughter spilling between them, unguarded, immersed in the belief that the house offered privacy, immunity, and secrecy. Their intimacy was palpable. The way Derek's hand found her waist, the casual, unthinking way Claire responded, every motion a testament to their unawareness that Jack was there, observing, understanding, and preparing to deliver the undeniable truth. They moved with the reckless confidence of those who believe themselves hidden, unaware of the silent witness at the threshold. Derek unbuttoned his shirt with an almost adolescent urgency, Claire responding with the casual, instinctive movements of a woman who believes her actions are protected by the darkness. Jack's heartbeat accelerated slightly, not with fear, not with anger, but with the anticipation of a moment he had been constructing with such painstaking care. Every second was a piece of a silent countdown, each gesture rehearsed in his mind as if he were watching a play in which he controlled every scene, every emotion, every consequence. And then, as the final act approached, he acted. Jack slid the glass door open with deliberate firmness. The soft track echoed sharply in the quiet room, cutting through the night like a blade. Silence fell instantly, suffocating and absolute. The backyard, illuminated by gentle lights, framed the scene like a theater, guests frozen in disbelief as they registered what they were witnessing. Julie was the first to scream, her voice raw, jagged with shock and betrayal, tearing through the stillness with a force that demanded attention. Derek froze, paled, every carefully constructed image of control evaporating in an instant. Claire's eyes widened, panic overtaking the brief smugness of assumed secrecy, her attempts to cover herself with a coat, futile, clumsy, too late. The exposure was total, undeniable, irreversible. The audience, friends, family, witnesses to a celebration they had believed would honor kindness, stood paralyzed, caught in the gravity of the revelation. Claire's mother clutched her face, unable to bear the sight. Her father's expression hardened into silent disgust. Her sisters exchanged shocked glances, caught between disbelief and horror. Julie, standing closest to Derek, unleashed words he had never imagined hearing, a torrent of anger, betrayal, and confrontation that left him stumbling, stammering, every excuse or explanation collapsing under the weight of reality. Claire attempted to flee, to escape to the bedroom as if retreat could erase the spectacle, but she was rooted, caught in the undeniable truth she had tried to hide so casually only hours before. Jack remained motionless, camera steady in hand, the silent chronicler of a betrayal finally revealed in its fullest form. He did not speak, he did not intervene, he allowed the truth to unfold as a living, breathing entity, unmediated, undeniable, unarguable. Each reaction, each gasp, each shriek and cry became part of the tableau, evidence of the fractures she had wrought through deception. Julie's anger collided with Derek's fumbling explanations, Claire's panic and shame intertwining in a dance of human vulnerability that left the room suspended in tension, every witness confronted with the reality of choices made behind closed doors. The magnitude of the revelation grew with every passing second, the silence between shrieks and sobs carrying weight far beyond the immediate moment. Jack's presence was deliberate. He needed no words to explain, no accusations to validate the truth. His calm, controlled demeanor contrasted sharply with the chaos of emotion that now filled the room. The backyard, soft lights casting gentle shadows, became the arena where honesty and betrayal collided, and every person present became a witness not just to infidelity, but to the consequences of choices made in the dark. Claire finally attempted to speak, words caught somewhere between fear and the desperate need for justification. Her voice trembled, weak, almost inaudible against the chorus of shock and confrontation around her. But Jack remained unmoved. No lecture, no pleading, no drama. The exposure itself was the lesson, the consequence, the inescapable reality. Julie's voice continued to rise and break. Derek stammered and recoiled under the weight of unmasking, and Claire, the architect of deception, was left with nothing but the raw, undeniable truth laid bare before every person she had sought to deceive. Time seemed to stretch, the gravity of the moment slowing the room's pulse. Jack finally lowered his arm, stopping the recording, and looked directly at Claire. She tried to form words, to explain, to plead, but the sound would not come. The silence between them spoke louder than any confession could. Her choices, her deception, had brought her to this point. He simply showed her the reality of what she had wrought, leaving nothing to doubt, nothing to interpret. She understood immediately, her body language, her frozen gaze, the pale panic on her face confirming it without a single sentence. The aftermath was immediate. Claire attempted to retreat, moving mechanically toward the bedroom as though the shadows might offer protection from the consequences of her own actions. Julie continued her confrontation with Derek, voices sharp and raw with the pain of betrayal finally recognized. Guests began to disperse, some still in shock, others embarrassed, unable to reconcile their participation in a gathering meant to celebrate virtue with the sudden immersion into scandal and revelation. Jack remained seated at the backyard table, a quiet, immovable anchor, his presence a testament to the control and calm with which he had orchestrated the entire event. He sipped a beer slowly, deliberately, each swallow an exercise in reclamation of his own calm, his own center, his own control over the narrative of his life. Claire appeared a few minutes later, fully dressed, makeup smeared, face etched with shame and sleepless despair. She attempted conversation, tentative, fragile, almost apologetic, but Jack raised his hand to indicate silence. Her words, explanations, justifications fell away, unheard. The truth had been revealed, the damage done, the consequences delivered in a manner that left no room for denial, no possibility of evasion. Jack's voice finally broke the tension, low, steady, firm. You had 7 years to tell me that you chose to lie and bring another man into our house. The blame for your choice isn't mine. Her eyes widened, the enormity of the moment, the irreversibility pressing down. He turned, moved upstairs, locked himself in the bedroom, and allowed himself the rare, private indulgence of grief and reflection. No shouting, no destruction, no pleading for recognition or apology. Just the calm, inexorable assertion of the truth, the careful orchestration of exposure, and the reclamation of his own integrity. The morning after the revelation was almost surreal in its silence. The house felt empty, not in the way a home feels at dawn when everyone is asleep, but in the hollow, echoing emptiness of betrayal exposed and trust, shattered beyond repair. Claire had left before the sun even touched the horizon, vanishing without a note, without a message, leaving only the residue of her absence and the heavy weight of consequences hanging in the air. Jack moved through the rooms as though performing a ritual of reclamation, each step measured, each action deliberate. He tidied the kitchen, stacking leftover plates and drinks from the night before, sweeping crumbs into the trash with the slow, precise care of someone who was not just cleaning the space, but reclaiming the history and memories that had once belonged to both of them and now belonged solely to him. Every movement was a declaration. This chapter was closed, and he would walk forward with clarity and control. For hours he simply stood, staring at his hands, the lines, the veins, the evidence of a life lived fully and yet shaken violently in an instant. His body moved mechanically, showering, making coffee, tidying drawers, but his mind wandered through the landscape of 7 years, examining, understanding, disentangling himself from a web of deceit that had ensnared his trust and reshaped his reality. He allowed himself to feel the pain fully, without restraint, without suppression. And yet, beneath the raw ache, a subtle thread of relief began to weave through him. It was not happiness, not yet, but a profound recognition that the truth, even when delivered through betrayal, had liberated him from illusions he no longer needed to carry. He called a close friend from work, someone he trusted implicitly, and requested a few days off. The words came easily, calmly. He needed time to recalibrate, to reconnect with the parts of his life that remained untouched by deceit, to reclaim a sense of self that had been quietly eroded over the years by absence, misdirection, and lies. The friend, sensing the gravity behind Jack's measured tone, agreed without question, offering support without intrusion, understanding that some storms must be weathered alone, in silence, at one's own pace. Jack set the phone aside, allowed the quiet to envelop him, and sat in the living room, eyes fixed on the ceiling as though the unbroken expanse above could somehow absorb the weight of his thoughts, the memory of betrayal, and the tentative stirrings of something resembling peace. The day stretched slowly, each minute deliberate, almost ceremonious as Jack began to reconstruct the rhythms of his life in a space now purged of falsehoods. He walked through the house, opening windows to let in fresh air, letting sunlight pour across surfaces that had long been shadows of their former selves. Drawers were rearranged, old photographs sorted, mementos reconsidered. Some were discarded, others repositioned, each placement a testament to careful thought and a silent assertion of control over the narrative of his life. The house, once a stage for hidden transgressions, became a sanctuary of clarity, a physical manifestation of the inner order he was painstakingly restoring. Over the next hours, Jack ventured outdoors, taking long, deliberate walks through the neighborhood, observing life moving forward with the casual grace of the unaware. He reconnected with friends long neglected, allowing conversations to ground him, their laughter and stories stitching him back into the world outside the house, outside the chaos of betrayal. Evenings were spent in reflection, sometimes alone, sometimes with a friend, each moment a careful reclamation of time, energy, and emotional space that had been quietly consumed by suspicion, by unanswered questions, and by the heavy shadow of unspoken truths. Meanwhile, Claire's absence became a constant, her presence remembered only in fleeting images, in the echoes of her laughter and the subtle habits she had left behind. Her actions were no longer a puzzle to decode in real time. They were a completed narrative, their consequences visible, absolute, and undeniable. Jack allowed himself a rare empathy, understanding that her remorse, her self-imposed distance, her relocation to a new city were attempts to navigate a guilt she could no longer hide from herself. But he did not allow these considerations to soften the firm boundaries he had established. She had acted, he had witnessed, and now the balance had shifted entirely. In the days that followed, the world moved on around him, indifferent to the silent victories and losses that had reshaped his personal landscape. Julie, Derek's estranged wife, reached out with a simple, sincere message. Gratitude for revealing the truth she had never suspected and never could have confronted alone. Jack responded with equal brevity, acknowledging her words without embellishment or hidden emotion. They met discreetly for coffee. Two people bound by shared clarity of vision, by a recognition of pain transformed into insight. Their conversation flowed naturally, free from the weight of past shadows, each interaction a step toward understanding and closure without the need to dwell on the past or resurrect the ghosts of deceit. Jack learned, slowly but definitively, that the revelation of truth is often more liberating than any attempt at reconciliation or restitution. By allowing the facts to speak for themselves, by orchestrating the exposure of deceit in a manner that demanded acknowledgement, he had carved a space of clarity in which he could breathe freely, unencumbered by illusions. With Julie, with friends, with himself, he began to understand that control over one's life is not about avoiding pain, but about confronting it with courage, precision, and patience, letting the consequences of others' choices unfold naturally while maintaining one's own integrity intact. Weeks passed, and Jack's home transformed from a site of betrayal into a haven of personal sovereignty. He removed lingering reminders of a fractured past, repositioned furniture to create new pathways and perspectives, allowed sunlight to reshape familiar spaces, and reclaimed the quiet that had once been dominated by the tension of uncertainty. Each action, each choice, reinforced a sense of autonomy he had almost forgotten he possessed, and every day became a meditation on resilience, on the power of calm observation, and the profound liberation found in witnessing truth rather than constructing arguments against deception. Eventually, Claire returned, not to reconcile, not to plead, but to acknowledge the reality she had created. Her face betrayed sleepless nights, anxiety, regret, yet Jack remained steadfast, observing without reaction. She asked for a few minutes, attempting to communicate understanding, trying to bridge a gap that had become unbridgeable. She explained her intentions to relocate, to seek distance from colleagues and the environment that had enabled her deception. She asserted that the act with Derek had been isolated, a single impulsive mistake with no continuation, and that she had immediately ceased contact. Jack listened, his expression controlled, neutral, the embodiment of someone who had already processed the truth, whose judgment was no longer negotiable. Her words were soft, tentative, attempts to soothe the undeniable rupture. Yet Jack's response was measured, unflinching, and final. Regret only comes when the consequence knocks on your door. Choices are made when no one is watching, and now you are trying to clean something you dirtied yourself. When trust dies, love dies with it. You made your choice. Silence followed, profound and unbroken. Claire understood. There was no further conversation, no negotiation, no appeals to forgiveness. She nodded, accepting the magnitude of her actions, and departed once more, leaving Jack in possession of his life, his home, and the equilibrium he had fought to restore. In the ensuing weeks, Jack resumed his routines, but with a renewed sense of presence and intentionality. He took more walks, rekindled friendships, and allowed himself to appreciate the quiet moments that had once gone unnoticed. Each day became an exercise in clarity, in rebuilding a life unshackled from lies, and in the quiet observation of truth as it manifests in the choices of others. The house, fully reclaimed, no longer carried the weight of hidden acts or unspoken betrayals. It reflected the careful, deliberate construction of a man who had endured deception, yet emerged with sovereignty intact. Occasionally, he reflected on the orchestration of that night, on the power of exposure without anger, without dramatization, relying solely on the undeniable facts and the careful presence of witnesses. The satisfaction was quiet, profound, rooted in the knowledge that he had allowed reality to speak, that deceit had been met not with impulsive retaliation, but with deliberate, immutable consequence. In this, he found a rare peace, an understanding that life, even when fractured by betrayal, offers the opportunity for clarity, for autonomy, and for the reconstruction of one's own narrative on one's own terms. Over time, Jack's interactions with Julie remained cordial, built on mutual recognition of truth and shared understanding of the complexity of human behavior. Derek became a distant figure, irrelevant in the narrative Jack now authored for himself. Claire remained a ghost of the past, her memory present only as a cautionary tale and a marker of boundaries firmly established. Jack no longer measured his days against the acts of others. He moved deliberately, with the calm assurance of a man who had reclaimed his autonomy and refused to surrender it again. He allowed himself to feel, fully, the weight of lessons learned, the fragility of trust, the inevitability of consequence, and the liberating power of truth. The past existed, undeniably, but it no longer commanded him. He walked through the house, adjusted furniture, opened windows, and allowed the light to illuminate spaces that had been darkened by secrecy. The ritual of living became an act of reclamation, each movement a testament to presence, integrity, and the conscious shaping of a life unbound by deception. Jack learned finally that the truth is the most profound gift one can give oneself. It is not always gentle, nor is it always easy, but it is absolute, unavoidable, and transformative. The betrayal he endured was a rupture, yes, but it also became the catalyst for a life renewed, for boundaries established, and for the quiet, deliberate cultivation of peace and clarity. In the absence of deception, Jack found himself again, fully present, fully aware, and fully free. And as the sun set, soft and deliberate, over the house that had witnessed both deceit and revelation, Jack understood the ultimate lesson. The past shapes us, but it does not define us. We define ourselves through presence, through clarity, and through the deliberate choice to honor truth above all. The house was silent, but in that silence, he heard not the echo of loss, but the resonance of sovereignty, integrity, and the unshakable calm that comes when one has faced betrayal and emerged whole.